Imagine you are watching the leaves fall. You know the herds are migrating south. You know the days are getting shorter. You've spent weeks gathering nuts, drying meat, and finding a deep rock shelter. And then the first snow hits. Not a light dusting, a blinding, howling blizzard that buries the landscape in 3 feet of white. It goes all day, then all night. Then the next morning, and the temperature drops to 10 below zero, and it stays there for weeks. So now you can't forage. You can't track animals because the snow is too deep and the wind erases everything. You can't leave the cave for more than a few minutes because the air actually burns your lungs. You are not resting. You are under siege. For most of human history, winter wasn't a season. It was a mass extinction event. And what ancient humans did when the world froze solid might be the single greatest engineering feat of our species. Today, when it gets cold, you turn up the thermostat, put on a sweater, and watch the snow fall from behind double-paned glass. You get a hot drink, maybe order delivery, and enjoy the cozy aesthetic. For you, winter is just an excuse to stay inside. But for a human being 30,000 years ago in Ice Age Europe, that same cold, the exact same frost you scrape off your windshield, could kill you in 3 different ways before the month was over. The first one is obvious: freezing. A human body without heavy insulation in sub-zero temperatures will experience frostbite on exposed skin in less than 30 minutes. Without a constant roaring heat source, a long freeze drops your core temperature into terminal hypothermia in hours. And the world our ancestors inhabited during the Last Glacial Maximum saw average winter temperatures that make modern Siberia look mild. The second one is starvation. Winter deleted the food. The plants died, the fruits rotted, and the large herds migrated hundreds of miles away, or hunkered down where you couldn't find them. And the third one, the silent killer, is energy bankruptcy. In extreme cold, your body burns up to twice as many calories just shivering to stay alive. So right when food becomes impossible to find, your body suddenly demands twice as much of it just to keep your blood pumping. Winter didn't just make life hard. It turned existence into a ticking clock. Humans, driven into dark rock shelters, had to survive a math problem: calories out versus calories in. And in the middle of all that ice, one technology mattered more than anything else: not fire, clothing. And here is why that was an absolute nightmare to figure out. Before roughly 100,000 years ago, humans mostly lived in climates where you could survive naked, or at most draped in a loose animal hide. But throwing a raw bearskin over your shoulders in an Ice Age blizzard is a death sentence. Wind cuts right through the gaps, so if you wanted to survive a deep winter, you couldn't just wear skin. You had to engineer garments. You had to create tailored, form-fitting, multi-layered clothing that trapped dead air against your body, and we know exactly how seriously they took this. In a site called Sungir in Russia, dating back about 32,000 years, archaeologists found human remains buried in what were essentially prehistoric snowsuits. These weren't crude loincloths. They were complex trousers, shirts, and boots, originally stitched together and decorated with thousands of carved mammoth ivory beads. The beads tell us the exact shape of the clothes because they fell into place as the fabric degraded over millennia. Even 30,000 years ago, surviving the cold was so dependent on tailored gear that humans spent thousands of hours sewing and decorating specialized winter suits. So when the deep freeze hit, you didn't just huddle and shiver, you manufactured. The archaeological record is overflowing with the evidence of winter work. To make tailored clothing, you need to pierce thick leather without tearing it. Stone awls and bone needles start showing up in the record in massive numbers, right as humans push into colder climates. The Denisova cave in Siberia yielded a bone needle with a perfectly drilled eye dating back roughly 50,000 years. These are tiny, fragile, incredibly precise tools. You don't carve a 2-inch bone needle while you're out hunting mammoths. You carve it when you are sitting in a cave, trapped by a blizzard, with nothing but time. One person's entire job for weeks might have been painstakingly scraping hides, chewing leather to soften it, and piercing seams with bone tools to make waterproof boots. Letting those boots fall apart wasn't just an inconvenience. It meant losing your toes to frostbite the next time you had to fetch firewood. Alright, so you are warmly dressed and the fire is going, but you still can't go outside, and you are starved. So what do you eat? You eat the invisible calories. If you look at animal bones from Ice Age winter camps, they aren't just stripped of meat, they are smashed to pieces. Everywhere archaeologists find Neanderthal or early modern human winter sites, they find millions of bone splinters. Why? Marrow and grease. Lean meat actually poisons you if you eat it without fat, a condition called protein starvation or rabbit starvation. In the dead of winter, animals lose all their body fat. The only fat left on a starving reindeer is locked deep inside its bones. Humans trapped by winter spent hours smashing bones, boiling them in hide bladders using heated rocks, and skimming the fat off the top to drink. They were essentially processing bone grease, a highly concentrated, non-perishable survival food. They didn't just survive on luck. They processed their kills with industrial efficiency. But you can't smash bones if you didn't kill anything, which means humans had to invent something else entirely: storage. For 1,000,000 years, humans lived day to day. You kill something, you eat it, but winter forces you to plan for a future you can't see. Archaeologists have found evidence of massive meat caches. In freezing climates, humans used the earth itself as a freezer. They would dig pits into the permafrost, sink chunks of meat into icy bogs, or bury carcasses under piles of rocks in freezing streams. Lactic acid from the bogs and the natural refrigeration of the ice preserved the meat for months. This wasn't basic foraging. This was a biological savings account. Someone stood in the freezing mud in October, burying half a reindeer, specifically so they wouldn't starve in February. Now, here is where it gets really interesting, because all of that, the clothing, the bone smashing, the freezing pits, that's just the mechanics of staying alive. What happened next changed how the human brain works. Think about the psychological toll of a long winter. The sun barely rises. You are stuck in a smoky cave with 20 other people. You can't leave. The sensory deprivation alone would drive a modern person insane. So what do you do with your mind? You track time. In the 1960s, a researcher named Alexander Marshak analyzed a piece of bone found in Blanchard, France, dating back about 30,000 years. It was covered in dozens of tiny, deliberate notches, carved with different tools over a long period. It wasn't a tally of kills, it was a lunar calendar. The notches perfectly matched the phases of the moon. Someone sat in that dark cave and tracked the days, the weeks, and the months. And think about why that matters. Nobody tracks the moon when it's sunny and the fruit is falling off the trees. You track the moon when you are counting the days until the ice melts, when you need to know exactly when the reindeer herds will return. Winter forced humans to project their minds into the future. It forced them to invent the concept of abstract time. And it wasn't just calendars, it was social survival. When a group of stressed, hungry primates is locked in a cave for a month, violence is a very real threat. The tension had to go somewhere, so they built deeply complex social structures. The long winter nights around the fire are where human language likely evolved its most complex form. They weren't just exchanging information, they were telling stories, singing, reinforcing kin networks, and creating mythologies. You don't need a complex myth about the sun god when you're picking berries in the summer. You need it to give your people hope when the sun hasn't been seen in 30 days. Winter forced humans to become storytellers just to keep from killing each other in the dark. Now, here's the part nobody talks about. Winter wasn't just a brutal test. It was actually the crucible that forged the modern human. Without deep winter, we might never have colonized the globe. Because the skills you need to survive a brutal freeze are the exact same skills you need to conquer the rest of the planet. Tailored clothing meant we could survive anywhere, not just the tropics. Food storage meant we weren't slaves to the daily hunt, giving us the freedom to migrate across barren continents. Lunar calendars meant we could predict the seasons, allowing us to eventually invent agriculture. Every terrible, freezing, miserable week stuck in a cave forced humans to innovate. The cold didn't stop human progress. It accelerated it. So, what did ancient humans do when winter lasted for weeks? Everything that made us who we are. They sewed the clothes that would let them walk across the Bering Land Bridge. They smashed the bones that fueled their starving brains. They buried the meat that bought them another month of life. They carved the calendars that mapped the heavens. And they told the stories that held their tiny, fragile communities together through the endless night. When the ice finally cracked and the spring thaw arrived, they walked out of those caves not just as survivors, but as engineers, timekeepers, and creators. Winter didn't freeze them in place. It gave them the ultimate deadline to adapt or die. And because they adapted, we inherited the Earth. It makes you wonder, though, with no alarm clocks and months of darkness, how did their bodies even know when to wake up? How did ancient humans know when to sleep without clocks?